What is going on, guys? And today we are back in the mix with our good friend, Mr. Chris Vitch, aka DeathDonkey. Mr. Donkey, how you doing today?
Good, Kyle. How are you?
I'm awesome, thank you. I know you're gonna be doing some announcing here in the PGT. You want to tell people about that real fast?
Sure, yeah. I'm headed next week to Poker Go, playing a bunch of mixed game prelim events of buy-ins from 5K to 25K, and then they're going to do, for the first time ever, a 100K 10 game, and myself, along with Alex Livingston, will be doing the commentary instead of playing, but I will be having some FOMO from that, but I'll be also excited to be in the booth and talk some mixed games there.
Well, I'm sure I'll be very excited to listen to you, and I'm sure people in this audience will be super excited to listen to you as well. But until then, got a little mixed review for you. So I got 5 hands for you. Last time we did deuce to 7. Feedback on that was great. So I figured we'd do another one today. We're going to do a little Omaha 8 or better. So,
Oh, we're stepping into your territory here.
yeah, I figured, I always want your feedback when I can take it. So let's jump right in. So hand 1 right here. We got King Deuce 5-4 in the cutoff. We'll just play this one out.
Seems like an okay hand. Nothing special, but reasonable.
Nothing special so far. It's these special flops that we get. So we raise, cut off, small blind calls, and the big blind calls. And
whoa, that's a flop.
That is a flop. We flop a wheel wrap, nut flush draw. Not much else to do when they check to me. I'm going to go ahead and bet this one.
For sure.
Now, one thing I do want to talk about a little bit. So the turn here, they both call, and then turn here's king. One thing I do want to talk about a little bit is when we tend to have these type of hands, I can't remember if it was one of your videos that I watched on YouTube recently, but when we have basically like these type of hands where we have all the blockers, like we have the nut flush draw, we have a wheel wrap, and now we turn a king, so obviously we turn a little bit of equity too, with respect to like sometimes we make trip kings on the river. If check 2 in the situation, like we're betting here. I think we have enough EV. That's not the question. But sometimes let's play this one out, and I'll kind of go where I'm going with this one.
Sure.
But I bet, and now small blind here, who is I would say relatively tight. He's definitely like an old school player. I would say check raises.
Okay.
And
not a great result for us.
Yeah, not a great result. And the big blind folds. Now, one of the things that I think a lot of players do in the spot is like when they have this type of hand, a lot of players just want to go ahead and like put the 3-bet in. It's like, oh, I have a wheel wrap, I have a flush draw, I have a lot of equity in this situation. And one of the things I struggle with too in this spot is like I want to just 3-bet this hand. I want to throw as much money in as I can, but at the same time too, I'm like, well, this doesn't really make sense because I'm unblocking the hands that are probably like never folding when I get check raised on this board. I don't block the jack 10s. I don't block aces up really. I mean, like obviously I have a king, but I really want to go for a 3-bet on these boards a lot, but I just can't pull that trigger. And I think like when I used to in the past, I'd just be burning a little bit more money. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on a situation like this, where like sometimes we want to think about turning our hand into like a semi bluff, but because, obviously we're just going to have to play the river. If we like brick out, like what's our plan? Just bet a hand that we probably shouldn't. I'd like to hear your feedback on this one.
Sure. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head when you were analyzing it, which is that you just don't block any of his actual value, right? I mean, you have a very good draw, but all the hands that he's probably check raising, you don't interact with really at all. Like, I think you're just going to get shown jack 10 here a lot. And if not that, then you're going to get shown a set of queens or maybe ace king if he's like relatively aggressive. And your hand doesn't really have the properties of something that I think would want to keep raising, other than you have a decent amount of equity, right? But like you're going to get to realize all that equity on the river anyway. So yeah, no, I'm not a fan of raising here. Maybe you find a combo once in a while when you have something like the deuce 4-5 jack when double suited pre that you had opened that has like some, you'd like to have at least one blocker to the nuts, I think.
Yeah, that makes a little bit of sense. Yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying. I guess like more of an exploit in general is I just don't think like on these type of board textures, players are going to fold like aces up ever. When you get to the river, you're like, oh, maybe I can turn the jack deuce 5-4. And I know what you're saying with respect to like maybe in some solver world, that's the type of combo that you want to have when turning your hand into a bluff. I just don't think like your opponents are folding. So,
right. I mean, if you're
yeah.
playing split pot poker with the intention of just trying to bluff on dynamic boards, then I don't really think that's the main way that the game works, right? I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
oftentimes you are bluffing when you have half the pot locked up and you'd like them to fold, you know, a share of the pot. But like these kind of naked bluffs on these sort of dynamic boards seem pretty crazy.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. And then
maybe if the river comes with certain couple cards, you know, you got some options like, ooh, like that one.
Yeah, it's a funky river, and we get that into, and well, again, like I know this player, I know his tendencies, and I know he's really, really tight. So I actually think on this board, like, I'm kind of dead. Now, in the real world, I'm just gonna let this play because I think about this for a long time. But in the real world, we're never folding this hand. I think we can both agree when we make trip kings on this river here, we're just kind of like biting our teeth and calling and just getting.
In theory, it seems like a crazy hand to fold, right? I mean, you just basically beat some weird thin value hands and also some bluffs. I mean, we just said that there shouldn't really be a lot of bluffs, and you kind of block all the bluffs. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like a great hand to have here. But on the other hand, when the low draw misses in these sort of situations, we do hope to find the surprising hand that we can scoop against. And
yeah, I do.
Three kings thing.
It's definitely one thing to take away too when the low misses is like now you have the opportunity to win the whole pot. And
right, you're getting a good price, even though it doesn't really seem very likely that it's going to work out.
But again, like you have I think just given the opportunity to win the whole pot, I think like you just have to find it sometimes. And we get here with the we do get shown the aces. And again, you know, like just saying like this player plays relatively tight. We can see if pre-flop decided not to bet the 3-bet the ace 8-6. So
right, that's a hand that really like a solver would never have, right? But it makes some sense. I mean, I think against a lot of opponents that maybe you're better off raising the river than calling because you know you probably do get a fold from Jack 10 at a non-zero frequency.
Sure.
So I don't know if you gave that any consideration. Were you between folding and calling?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it's just basically folding or calling, but you know, you make a really good point there with considering raising. I think the problem is like I think most people, especially when the low misses, are just so unlikely to fold Jack 10. I think like you will get folds. I just don't think it's going to be a profitable raise. I think they're just going to overcall with it. So.
Well, I guess my question is, I mean, obviously we have ace king here. Obviously we have aces and we have hands like king free, king queen. Like if you're raising for pure value with all those hands, like there has to be a bluff, right? And
sure, yeah.
I would think that a hand with a king in it would make the best bluff.
Yeah.
So I guess you're just saying from an exploit point of view, you want to be very value heavy here, but I don't know. I kind of disagree with your player read that like, I mean, maybe not this guy. I don't know this guy, but in general, I think that people kind of love bet folding the river.
Okay. Interesting. Well, I'll take that into consideration.
I just want to save the bet. We don't have the most obvious full house in the world.
That's very, very, very true. I will make sure to keep firing it off and see when I can get the fold. But yes, I will definitely try that. But I think, yeah, for sure. I actually think like you make a really good point though. And this is something that I didn't even consider. Like I get to this river and I think to myself, oh, I have value here. I might as well call. And in reality, it's like, oh, well, against, you know, the hands that I don't necessarily have. And I don't block Jack 10 here, which makes sense again. So like this could be the hand to turn into a bluff. So I
wouldn't think you'd have much better candidate. I guess maybe a hand like ace 3 would be maybe even better.
Yeah, that's an interesting one too, for sure. All right, let's go to the next one. Hand 2. I actually think it's the next hand. It is the next hand. All right. So okay. Ace deuce 5-9. Obviously, we're gonna
like another solid hand. Yeah, better than the last one even.
3-bet over here by the Australian golfer Cam Smith. We get cold call in the big blind here, and this is a 5-bet. These are 5-bet games. So
interesting. I was gonna suggest that we 4-bet.
Yeah. So I do elect against the cold call to 4-bet.
Seems totally fine. I think this is like a play that can never be that bad and can maybe be quite good, and like people just tend to be a little too scared or a little too pessimistic free flop.
Well, I think too, like, you know, you talked about it in one of your recent videos with respect to the 3 blinds and limit hold'em. And usually what happens is the small blind, I think you said something along the lines of like, if the small blind adds a cold calling range, like the big blind does a lot of 3-betting. Yeah. Yeah. So I got to imagine like usually in these situations here, if we have a a relatively, I wouldn't, a relatively wide range. Like in this situation, we're probably doing a lot of four betting, right?
And maybe even it's not a question of how wide is his range, but more a question of how capped is his range, right? Like, I mean, if he doesn't have a lot of ace deuce combos and ace ace combos himself, then like your hand just can never be performing poorly.
Yeah, right. That makes total sense.
I also think that it is helpful that you have the suited ace. I mean, I wouldn't do it with all ace deuce combos.
No, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. Like obviously I would do it with the majority of like double suited and then suited ace and then probably kind of stop there. I do get called.
And then you know this, but one thing I would throw out there for viewers too is like the main thing to remember about jamming pre is that doesn't obligate you to continue c betting. Like you need to reevaluate on each flop, right?
Sure.
And this is like a flop that's like kind of questionable.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, on this board when obviously like when check two and I do four bet, like obviously I think I'm like I would think that this hand tends to have an ace in it pretty high. I would think that you know, this hand over here has an ace the majority of the time, but I'm not quite sure. But I would still say that I have probably the only hand that can have ace ace. This one can have, I would say, like bad ace ace. Yeah. But my hand probably has the only one that has ace ace, and I obviously have like a lot of ace deuce combos. So I have to think on this board like I'm probably doing some betting.
I agree. I think that one thing I would be a little concerned about would just be your exact hand. Like there's just not a lot of good turns and rivers for this hand, right? I mean, if you had a backdoor flush draw even, I would feel better about it.
Sure.
On the other hand, because you did jam it pre, the pot is quite bloated at this point, and if you can get anyone to fold any kind of equity here, that's a pretty great result, right? Like if the big blind has a hand like, you know, king 8-7, let's say, something weird like that. I mean, that hand is still a hand you would love to get to fold.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
So I'm a little torn, but betting can't be too bad.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. Like sometimes
and he does fold, which is a great result.
Yeah.
I think now I would like to go passive.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do on this turn. Like I don't block any of the wheel cards. You know,
you're not going to improve, really. I mean,
no,
I do no low.
I'm just going to try to, I think, get this hand to showdown. And then like the river here's kind
of... After check, but I think you could bet.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting one. All right. So yeah, on the river, I actually go with the
power. I would bet the river now.
Yeah, I think you're right. I also think too,
you can maybe get him to fold. There's like actually a world in which he can fold an emergency low. I think like he could feel like, what if he has something like, you know, I don't know, like a live 4.
I think a live 4 snap calls once I check turn. I really do, just because like I think if I have aces up in a live 3 or 4 for the most part, I'm doing a little bit of betting. Maybe I'm checking like something this hand where if you change this to like ace deuce 4-9, then maybe on the turn I'm considering doing a little bit of checking. But I do have equity in that situation, so
I would just be thinking like how bad can it be to bet here, right? I mean, maybe something good happens, and it's pretty hard to imagine him having you beat unless he has exactly ace 8 with something funky.
Yeah, that's true too. That's true.
You don't get raised here.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't get raised here. That's a really good point too.
I just see good things happening maybe by betting.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you've convinced me. You convinced me to go back in time and change my play. And
yeah, and plus you could just scoop. There's also that. He could just have that.
We could just scoop the ace deuce queen 9. So, all right, we scooped that one.
And you were fine pre-flop. I mean, he has ace deuce queen 9 Badoogie, and the other guy had something weird. So
for sure,
it's always a good sign.
All right, hand 3 here.
More limit 08.
More of the best game.
Kind of a rough hand here in the big blind.
Yeah, rough hand here in the big blind. I believe small blind's going to cold call here. So we have kings. We have a suited king in the big blind. We have 3 like middling cards. I think we're just still going to call and like just throw the money in and say, all right, what's the flop?
Sure. I always find these hands difficult to play, but obviously we have equity.
Yeah, sure. I 100% agree. Flop, not the best flop for our hand. Obviously, we flop bottom, gut shot, backdoor spades, 1 overcard with the king. I think actually with this like exact hand on this board, I think it's like kind of close, because again, if I make 2 pair that's kings up, I think I'm doing okay. But if I make any other 2 pair with 7s and 8s, obviously there's straights out there, lows made, I've just lost half most likely. I can make trip 4s, but sometimes it's still not good. We do have a back.
Yeah, I mean that's the glass half empty. But on the other hand, the ranges are fairly wide here. Nobody's really shown strength pre-flop. So, you're not always up against like an ace-deuce type of combo here. And, you've got a little bit of everything closing the action.
That's pretty much exactly how I thought about this hand. Like, I have a little bit of everything, and I like to see a turn. So now we make trip fours.
You did it.
No, we did it. We found a way.
Let's bet, right?
Yeah. All right. I love to hear it. So that's exactly
like kind of a good concept in limit poker, right? In general, is that like board pairs are usually good for the callers. And not so good. Like the pre-flop raiser here, you have to be thinking like, okay, people tend to oversee bet these spots, right? So he's already kind of just bet everything, and he got called into spots. So you would think that a lot of players here are going to take a free card when they have like a weak low draw, or a pair that's not really getting any better. I would be really, really worried about this checking around.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, if I had a couple people behind me, then maybe I would consider it. But I also think too, like the more players in hand, a lot of times, if check to the button's going to play a little bit more straightforward, because it's really hard to get like through.
Well, also the more players in the hand, the more you're just kind of maybe beat sometimes, right? Too. So you don't want to be opening the action like too much in a multi-way situation.
Sure, yeah, but I was definitely concerned about button here checking. So I go ahead and bet.
I like it.
Button calls, rivers, jack of hearts. And this
is the best river.
Yeah, it's one of those spots. Now, this is something I definitely wanted to mention, because to me, this is one of those spots where it's like, if I check here in this situation, usually the player in position here gets to kind of play perfect. But I also think too, like I can, if I bet here, I can also get some worse hands to call me. I think that's a given the fact that there's no low now, and obviously like there's chances here that he thinks I might be making a move at the pot, and he might show down like 10 jack, he might show down over pairs. So I think I have some value here betting, but at the same time too, it's like if I check, part of me wants to check this hand, but at the same time too, I think like my hand is just better as a bet, and hoping I get called by worse.
Yeah, I think that's all true. I mean, it's a spot where you should go relatively thin. He should call relatively wide. When the low misses and possibly some straight draw type of cards have missed. I mean, having a hard in your hand, I guess, has to help a little bit.
Okay. Is there any like with respect to that concept in these spots? Like I would, when you want to like, I think this happens a lot sometimes in stud, where maybe not stud, but like these situations where you're out of position. Like if I check, player only, like bets better kind of thing. Like,
right.
How do you identify that? Is it just through just experience for the most part, or is there like something with respect to like where we want to see in our value range?
I think in general, it just comes from the situation in which you're representing a strong hand or a miss, which like here, I mean, it's not like you're saying you only have trips when you bet the turn, but you're saying I have trips more than you do, right? So that often does lead to sort of just like continuing to bet. And, it takes a kind of a weird player type where it becomes better to check these medium strength hands to them, right? Like they have to be aggressive enough to bluff, but like not aggressive enough that like they're going to like get suspicious of you and want to bluff catch you wide on the river, right? So it's hard to think of a player type where that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
So you should probably just do a lot of betting in these spots.
Yep. And that's what we did.
And know that you're going to lose sometimes, right? When you're out of position, you do a lot of merge betting where it's just like, yeah, it doesn't always work out for me, but that's just part of the game. And
sure. And this is a good example of that. Yeah.
You don't even get raised by the nut flush here with a jack blocker, which definitely should raise and call a 3-bet probably.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right. Another one here. We got the 6-6-3-4 double. Same player we just played against opens this one. And we 3-bet the 6-6-3-4 double.
Sure, which looks standard to me, but probably for some of your viewers is thinking like, well, this doesn't look like a particularly strong 08 hand.
Yeah, no, I do a lot of the commentary, and the funny thing is that when I do my commentary, a lot of times I tell everyone, it's like, listen, you definitely want an ace in your hand. It's like, oh, look, here's another one without an ace. I'm 3-bet.
Yeah, except for when you have like a bunch of low cards double suited, which are just kind of where your weird bluffs come from.
Yeah, that's a really good one too. All right, so here we
cold called here. Yeah, interesting spot.
Big blind cold calls. So we went 3-bets pre, and we are the 3-better, and we flop a lower wrap here, low flush draw, with some low equity. So we kind of flop like it's one of these spots where we flop like a fair bit of equity, like every which direction, but not like a ton one way or the other. So
All right, but can you hold on a second? Because I was
Sure.
going to suggest that maybe we check this flop.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
I mean, I would be pretty concerned about what, like, you would describe the big blind earlier as like kind of an old school type player. It's like one thing that you have to like, one thing I like to think about when I'm playing against, people that I think kind of are not that tough, right? Is that they undervalue their hands pre. So you run into like ace deuce here a ton, right? You run into like strong hands here. I mean, earlier he cold called aces. So a lot of your value in c betting is one, when you have a bunch of equity, or two, when you have fold equity, right? But like here, your equity is a little worse than it looks because your 3-4 low draw is not really worth that much. And two, your fold equity seems like worse than normal because they can still have all those premium hands that like missed a raise pre-flop. So I don't know. I feel like your draw is pretty weak, and maybe you just take advantage of them by just like playing a smaller pot now.
I think you make a really good point. This is just something that I would not have thought about until you just pointed that out. But the fact that probably this hand up here can still have some strong hands, while this hand up here probably can have a lot of strong hands. I think you make a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of not that fun, but the way you take advantage of those players making mistakes is you just take more free cards.
That's fair.
And you'll also kind of confuse them a little bit when you make a flush on the turn. You can actually get some value, maybe.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I think actually, like, before in some of the games when like PLO is probably a good example of this, is before a lot of the solvers came out, like if your opponent like ever checked back a flush draw in position and then showed up with a flush, it was kind of a
it was unbelievable, right?
How do you have a weird thing? Yeah, how do you have a flush? Yeah, so
yeah, because I mean now you've gotten check raise and you're really gonna have to get to the river with this hand, but it's like there's a world in which you have very few outs.
Yeah, you're right. So given everything that you just said, I decided to bet.
Oh my God, no! Not both.
After all that, I decided to I'm like, well, because it's kind of funny because like given the fact that we talked about this player up here being, I would say, like somewhat old school and being a little bit tighter, I also thought like if I get this hand to ever fold, like I'm doing great in position here with I'm sure
your hand is better heads up, but I don't know. I want to put in $0 and you've now put in 6. I'm a little concerned about this situation.
It's always a bad sign when you're laughing at me through the entire hand. So
I did not expect a 3-bet.
All right, so we 3-bet and he folds.
Hey, what a hero!
Sure, of course.
And you turn it straight. Everything's great.
Life's a dream. So once we turn it straight.
Well, now I like your hand fine.
Yeah, now
really hard to scoop you now.
Yeah, now it's really hard to scoop for sure. And plus we have 2 6s, so it makes it very unlikely. Now
you just bet here.
Well, the river's kind of interesting because I'm not quite sure if we ever scoop on this river. And one second. Okay. When we get to these rivers, and it's like one of these spots where I don't think you can necessarily scoop. I'm not quite sure if we're just supposed to bet or if we're actually supposed to check a hand even as strong as this. And because like
he never has just a high hand, he never has, aces with spades or,
I mean, it's theoretically it's possible, I guess. I mean, I do have 2 spades in my hand, so I guess that combo is maybe a little bit less likely, but I'm just wondering on like the
I don't know. I don't make the pot this big and then worry about whether I should go for a thin value bet getting, when the pot has 10 bets in it, I guess is how I would look at it. Like, yeah, sure. I mean, there is an argument that you're always chopping here or you lose to the random, ace 3, 5, 7 or whatever sometimes, but I don't know. They show up with weird hands more than you think.
No, that's probably fair too. Also too, it's like, when I do bet and do get called and he does have ace 2, 7. But I also think too, like sometimes when I get check raised here and like the hands he does have me scooped with, I would say like obviously like I lose 2 bets versus like gaining 1. So I don't know if that really makes big of a difference or not. But yeah, I'll just leave it there at that one. So I got a good minute and a half of you laughing at my play, which is that's a
well, it was just that we had very different views on that hand, which is always interesting.
You're so politically correct. I love it. All right. Ace King 3-7 double big blind.
Looking good.
Yeah, this was from another game. And then here, like double suited. Sorry, so again, we 3-bet this one. Button calls. And we get a run out in which I don't necessarily know if the big blind here, or I mean, like I obviously have a stronger range than the button here, but on this board texture, I'm not quite sure who's I would say like necessarily ahead, just because like I have a ton of these like ace deuce three combos, meaning like yeah, I have a lot of like aces and aces up, and like maybe some live wheel draws, but I unblock the fours, the fives, the diamonds. I do have the
Yeah, my memory from studying these spots a little bit is that the three low boards, particularly the ace high low three low boards, definitely favor the caller. And I think your hand doesn't really need any protection from the sort of hands that he's going to snap fold, like high hands. If he has a hand like, I don't know, queen, queen, jack 10, something he probably should not have raised on the button, like he's just going to snap fold, and obviously you're killing that hand, don't need any protection from it. So I can live with a check. I mean, I guess maybe with aces up and backward clubs, it wouldn't be too bad either way.
Yeah, I think I kind of like looking at this board. Like obviously if I had aces up and a wheel draw here, I think this is more than a bet than not, especially even with like the backdoor nut flush draw. But I did elect to go for a check here.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but it seems like it's not a big deal either way. It's definitely not a hand that must bet, I don't think.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I do think players in general will overbet this board way, like very, very, very high frequency once they 3-bet. They'll just go ahead and like almost auto c-bet. But
but it might not be that bad if their 3-betting range is solid-ish pre, right? Like they might not 3-bet enough bad hands, and so it just, how bad can it be?
Sure. Okay, that's true too.
Okay, so now let's think about this turn card. I mean, he has a random 5 in his hand, and the question is there any point to betting, right? Like, what can you get anything to fold half? You have a live 7 and aces up. It doesn't really seem like betting accomplishes much here.
Yeah, I wonder if my like opponent here can ever actually have like ace 4, ace 5. Like my opponent here, I think can have him like.
He probably can. He probably shouldn't, but he probably can because they're kind of passive.
Yeah, sure.
And you probably confused him by checking the flop.
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed it, but the opponent there did time for a little bit and then decided to check, kind of like, I didn't expect my opponent to check here. Maybe I'll check this one back. And
right.
Like I obviously if I bet here, I'm getting raised by a wheel. He's never folding a 6. Like if I have a live, if he has got a live 7, he's probably doing, definitely doing some calling here, I would say. So, like again, it's like one of those spots where I don't necessarily know where the value is from betting in this spot. Like, so I will play this one, and I do elect to check again.
Yeah, no strong feeling on this.
Cool. And the river kind of runs out. Interesting. So now we got a wheel on board with a flush. And I don't have a 6, because if I had a 6 in this situation, I think this hand is pretty easy.
Right. Bet. Then you're getting value, but as played, just check call.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we did. We checked. And now the button does bet.
And he finally found a bet, but I don't see how you can fold.
Yeah, I'm never folding a wheel,
honestly. Oh, and he has, yeah. I mean, he probably, interesting hand from him, right? I mean, he kind of flops a fake good hand, right? Because this hand, it has some high equity, but he has to be worried that he doesn't have the best current high hand. I mean, it does make sense that you would have ace XYZ a lot.
Sure.
And there's not too many great runouts for him, although he found one. Maybe an okay played hand by both.
Yeah. Yeah, when I first saw his hand, I was definitely asking myself, I'm like, I wonder if he wants to turn his hand like someone into a semi bluff, because
I mean, maybe by betting the flop, he could clear out some equity from some hands, like, I don't know, maybe there's some king combos that can't continue, but they all kind of feel like they'd have low cards, right? So it doesn't really strike me, and he has a king in his hand, so I don't know. It's kind of hard to think of hands that he really hasn't eaten, that like really going to get to fold. That he wants to fold.
Sure, I mean that makes some sense too. So yeah, but yeah, those are the 5 that I got right there, and
08's a hard game, right? I mean, that's like, we go through these hands, and there's a lot of close decisions, and you get some awkward spots. Obviously, just getting to showdown a lot can never be a bad strategy in this game, but man, these hands, I feel a lot less confident in these than compared to triple draw hands.
Well, yeah, and the other thing too, I mean, anytime, I mean, you can just probably say that about any split pot game, right? It's like once you add the different dynamic in there, it's it just changes like how the way you kind of have to think about a lot of these spots.
And I always tell students that in split pot poker, you're more just trying to like make the pot size right for your hand, because there is going to be a high showdown. You're not going to do a ton of bluffing, right? Those spots are kind of rare. Whereas in draw games, like sometimes you end up in a situation where your hand becomes a mandatory bluff or something like that. But like in these games, it's more just about like, did you put in the right amount of action pre-flop? And we talked about some ideas for adjusting to that, or maybe some ideas for like, saving bets on the flop. And that other hand kind of came to me as the most important things from this.
Yeah, well, as always, I super appreciate you letting me pick your brain for 30 minutes. And let's
Sure, man. It's always a treat to watch you play some Omaha 8 or better.
I always appreciate the laughs I get. You still, get some humor out of some of my play, so I do appreciate it. That there's some thinking going on there. But let's see here. You got your YouTube channel still at DeathDonkey. You're still on X at DeathDonkey. And if anyone else wants to get a hold of you for any sort of lessons or anything else, how should they do it?
Yeah, that'll do it. Find me there. My email's on my YouTube channel, and always happy to chat mixed games with any new students and everything. Thanks for the support, Kyle.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to the PGT. Not only watching you play, but doing the commentary in the 100K. I think that's awesome. And
yeah, me as well. It should be fun.
Yeah. Well, until then, guys, if you have any questions for Chris, you can go to X and you can send him a message, or you can watch him on YouTube and comment in his videos. He's doing a lot of the GTO stuff, which is great, just to kind of change your thinking a little bit. And as always, Chris, I thank you so much for doing this and spending the time with us. And
sounds good.
Yeah, we'll talk to all you guys soon. Take care. Play well. Bye-bye.